Zawadi, just 17 years old, walked through the village of Jambazi, feeling the weight of each step. The basket of firewood she carried on her back was nothing compared to the invisible load that had accompanied her since she could remember. The looks of contempt, the muffled laughs, and the cruel words that followed her like a shadow. Since he was born without a single strand of hair, his appearance was a constant source of ridicule. Even at home, where he should have found comfort, the provocations did not stop. His Aunt Mwalimu, a woman with a sharp tongue and little affection, never missed an opportunity to be mocking. Not even the trees would lend their leaves to cover that smooth head, he said, between laughs, while Zawadi pretended not to hear, but felt each word like a knife that pierced his soul. That afternoon, Zawadi had gone out to fetch firewood from the nearby forest. It was a task she preferred to do alone, as it allowed her to escape, even for a few hours, from the village in the company of others. However, fate seemed determined not to give him peace. A group of children, led by Kabwana, a boy known for his mischief, began to follow her. They laughed, pointed, and shouted, "Look, it's Zawadi, the girl without hair, like a shiny egg." She tried to ignore them, but the teasing intensified. "Zawadi, be careful, the sun doesn't use you as a mirror." Desperate to escape, Zawadi began to run, the sound of laughter echoing behind her. Her bare feet tapped against the dry ground as she entered the Duma forest, a place no one had dared to visit for a long time. Duma was surrounded by dark stories and ancient legends. It was said that those who went deep into the forest might never return. But Zawadi, driven by pain and the need to escape, didn't care. "The only thing I wanted was to disappear from that world that seemed so cruel." As he ran, he tripped over something hard and fell. For a moment, silence took over. The sound of children had disappeared, and she realized she was completely alone. Looking back, she saw what had caused her to fall, a black, polished stone that shined even under the shadow of the trees. She had never seen anything like this before. The stone seemed alive. Engraved on its surface was an inscription in an ancient language, but part of it was in his language. "Make your deepest desire." Zawadi felt his heart quicken. His mind swirled with questions, but also with a single certainty: that stone was special. With tears in her eyes, she knelt down and touched the cold, smooth surface. For a moment he hesitated. He remembered the laughter, the cruel words, the loneliness. His heart was heavy, but his voice was low, almost like a whisper. "I want long, beautiful hair like a queen's." When he finished, something extraordinary happened. The stone glowed brightly, filling the forest with a light that seemed to come from another world. It was as if time itself had stopped. Zawadi felt heat rise through his hands, throughout his body. Then, everything around her went dark, and she lost track of what was real. During that moment of darkness, Zawadi heard a distant voice, almost a whisper, saying, "Your wish will be granted, but remember, every wish carries a price." She tried to respond, but felt unable to speak, as if she were trapped in a dream she couldn't control. The only thing left was the feeling of something shifting inside her, something deep that she couldn't understand. When she opened her eyes again, she was alone, lying on the forest floor. The stone had disappeared, as if it had never existed. She sat up slowly, still trying to understand what had happened. Everything seemed the same, but when she ran her hand over her head, something different made her freeze. His fingers didn't touch the smooth, familiar skin. Instead, they felt something soft, silky, and long. Zawadi gasped, standing up quickly. He ran to a small puddle of water that reflected his image. What she saw left her speechless. Her hair, long and golden, fell to her waist. They shone like rays of sunlight. Each strand seemed to be made of gold. For the first time in his life, Zawadi saw something in himself that was not a subject of contempt, but pure beauty. As he watched his reflection, a lone tear ran down his face. It was happiness, mixed with something deeper, something she still couldn't understand. But at that moment, it didn't matter. For the first time, she felt like the world would see her differently. Yet the forest seemed quieter than ever, as if something was lurking, watching, waiting for Zawadi's next move. When Zawadi opened his eyes that morning, an unusual feeling ran through his body. The air felt lighter, as if the weight of the world that it always carried had been momentarily lifted. Still lying on her worn mat, she felt something different, something she couldn't identify. As he passed his hand over his head, where he had always found the smooth, cold skin that was so familiar, he felt something new, softness, a silky, vibrant touch. The initial shock was so great that she remained motionless for a few seconds, trying to understand if she was awake or trapped in some kind of strange dream. But this was real. Hurriedly standing up, Zawadi tripped over his sandals before running out of his hut. Her heart beat wildly as she searched for an answer in the reflection of the water mirror she used to wash her face every morning. What she saw left her speechless. Her previously non-existent hair now flowed like a golden river, falling to her waist in perfect waves. They sparkled in the sunlight, as if each strand was made of pure gold. She touched her hair repeatedly, trying to convince herself that she wasn't hallucinating. In all her life, Zawadi had never felt like this. So enchanted, so dazzled, and for the first time, so different from the girl people mocked and ignored. In the village, the impact of its transformation was immediate. The children who had previously laughed at her now stopped to watch her with wide eyes. The leader of the group, Kabwana, who always made a point of being the cruelest, remained silent, unable to say any words. "Is that Zawadi?" someone whispered, and within minutes, a small crowd began to form around her. The admiring looks were something Zawadi had never experienced. For years, she had been invisible, or worse, a ridiculed presence. Now, she was the center of attention, and the faces that once held scorn now displayed surprise and even a touch of reverence. Mwalimu, his aunt, appeared among the people. With half-closed eyes, she observed her niece with an expression of pure distrust. "Zawadi," she said, her voice dry. "What did you do? How did you achieve this? What trick did you use?" The question came as an accusation, but there was something deeper in his words, a mix of envy and fear. Zawadi, however, had no answers. The golden shine of her hair was as mysterious to her as it was to others. Unable to explain what had happened, she simply replied, "I don't know." But his words did not convince Mwalimu, whose eyes remained fixed on the golden threads, now swaying gently in the wind. The following days brought rapid and unexpected changes. Zawadi, who was previously shunned, was now invited to parties, celebrations, and even important ceremonies in the village. People believed that their hair brought luck and prosperity. They wanted to touch them, feel their texture, as if they could absorb some of that magic. At the wedding of the elder Kofi's daughter, Zawadi was invited to occupy a prominent place. Older women braided her hair elaborately, decorating it with beads and beads, while guests approached to praise her. "You look like a queen, Zawadi," said one of the women, while another added, "Your hair is a gift from the gods." But with the admiration also came the looks of greed and murmurs of envy. Some women in the village began to whisper among themselves, wondering how Zawadi, the girl who had always been laughed at, now possessed something so extraordinary. There were rumors that she had made a pact with forest spirits, or even darker forces. One of the neighbors, Nyahira, was heard saying, "This is not natural. Something like this always has a price." Others just looked from afar, with narrowed eyes and uncertain thoughts. Zawadi, however, was torn. Part of her reveled in the new attention and respect she was receiving. But another, deeper part was beginning to feel a growing discomfort. The greedy looks, the suspicious murmurs, the way people approached her with hidden intentions. It all weighed heavily on her heart. And then there were the dreams. From that morning, Zawadi began to have strange and disturbing nightmares. In her dreams, she saw her hair turning into golden chains that bound her, while distant voices whispered things she couldn't understand. She would wake up sweaty, with a racing heart and the feeling that something was wrong, although she didn't know exactly what. Despite her discomfort, Zawadi continued to play the role the village seemed to expect of her. She smiled, allowed people to touch her hair, and thanked them for their compliments, even when she felt that something inside her was changing. But whenever she was alone, she couldn't help but touch the golden strands and wonder, why? Why had this happened to her? And, more importantly, what would come next? As the village placed her on a pedestal, Zawadi began to realize that admiration didn't always come without consequences, and the feeling that something was coming only grew stronger each day. The village of Jambazi was celebrating that night. The harvest festival was one of the most anticipated celebrations of the year, with drums echoing through the square, bonfires lighting up smiling faces, and the aroma of traditional foods filling the air. Zawadi, now a central figure in the celebrations, was surrounded by people who danced, laughed, and watched her in awe. Her golden hair, braided and decorated with shining beads, reflected the firelight, giving her an almost divine appearance. But amid the music and laughter, Zawadi began to feel something strange. At first, it was just a slight discomfort, a faint throbbing in his head that seemed to keep pace with the drums. She tried to ignore it, but the feeling intensified. The throbbing became a pain, as if something was squeezing his scalp from the inside out. Placing her hands on her head, Zawadi felt her hair moving in a strange way, as if it had a life of its own. Scared, she moved away from people, looking for a more isolated place. Each step seemed to increase the intensity of the pain, and his fingers, as he tried to hold the threads, felt them intertwining, forming intricate knots that seemed impossible to untie. Already far from the crowd, Zawadi picked up a small blade that he always carried with him. With shaking hands, he tried to cut the wires. The blade glittered as it came into contact with the hair, but to his surprise, it failed to penetrate the hair. It was as if they were made of something indestructible, something that did not belong to this world. Desperate, she tried again, applying more force, but the result was the same. The heat of pain pulsed through his head, while fear settled deep in his heart. "What is happening to me?" she whispered to herself, as tears ran down her face. The next morning, Zawadi left his hut with hesitant steps. The village, which had previously seemed welcoming and full of life, now felt heavy, almost oppressive. As she walked through the market, she noticed that people were watching her, but not with the same admiring look she had become accustomed to. There was something different. Murmurs could be heard from all directions, but no words were clear enough for her to understand. The looks of delight had turned to something darker. Fear, perhaps even distrust. That's when he heard a familiar voice. Nayahira, a woman known for her blunt and often cruel comments, approached. His face was serious, full of concern. "Zawadi," she began with a tone that didn't seem accusatory but wasn't friendly either. "My son, Omari, touched your hair last night. He was so excited he believed his threads brought luck. But this morning, he woke up sick, with a high fever and tremors that didn't stop. This has never happened before. Something is wrong." Nayahira's words were like a stone thrown into a still lake, creating ripples that spread quickly. Zawadi tried to respond, but his voice broke. "I didn't know what to say. Could it be coincidence? Or was her hair really causing something bad?" Other people began to approach, each with their own stories. "My goat got sick after I touched it after touching Zawadi's hair," said a man. "My crops started to wither the same night I saw it at the festival," murmured another woman. The accusations, although indirect, began to gain strength. The village, which had previously welcomed her with praise and invitations, now seemed to turn against her. People moved away as she passed, and the children, who had previously followed her, now watched her from afar, their eyes wide with fear. Inside, Zawadi felt a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her wanted to believe that it was all just coincidences, but another, deeper part feared that there might be truth in people's words. The murmurs continued to grow, spreading like fire through dry grass. Some women whispered about curses, while others spoke of forest spirits. Walamo, who until then had remained silent, approached with a hard look. "I knew this was weird from the start," she said, her voice low but full of venom. "Nothing like this comes without a price. You have brought something to this village, Zawadi, something we don't understand." Zawadi felt the weight of the words like stones in his chest. What was once admiration now turned to fear and rejection. People began to deliberately avoid her, some even leaving their huts when they saw her approaching. She was no longer the admired girl with golden hair, but someone who carried something dangerous, something no one could explain. As she walked back to her hut, alone and confused, Zawadi felt like the world around her was changing. The golden glow that once seemed like a blessing was now seen as a threat. And, in the back of his mind, a question echoed incessantly. What would be the true price of his desire? Desperate and not knowing where else to run, Zawadi decided to return to the Duma forest. The same forest that terrified her as a child now seemed to be the only place she could find answers. Every step he took was accompanied by an unsettling silence, broken only by the sound of dry leaves crunching beneath his feet. The air felt heavier as she entered the heart of the forest, where sunlight could barely penetrate the dense tangle of branches. His heart was pounding, not just from fear, but from the anguish of carrying something that seemed to be escaping his control. She was looking for the black stone, the origin of everything that had happened. The golden shine of her hair, which was once a source of pride, now seemed like a chain imprisoning her in a nightmare. The murmurs of the villagers echoed in his mind. Curse, danger, misfortune. His eyes roamed every corner of the forest, searching for that mysterious artifact. It was then that she saw something she didn't expect. Sitting on a fallen log was an elderly man, with skin as dark as night and eyes so deep they seemed to see through it. He wore a simple cloak made of raw material and held a worn wooden staff. Despite his fragile appearance, there was something about him that conveyed an almost palpable strength. "You have finally come," said the old man, his voice low but firm, like the sound of distant thunder. Zawadi stopped, confused. She had never seen him before, but he seemed to know her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaking. "My name is Jabali," he replied, as he slowly stood up. "And I know why you are here." Before Zawadi could respond, he pointed to a small piece of stone on the ground, exactly like the one she had found before. "This artifact you sought is no ordinary stone. It's a test, a portal into people's deepest desires. But wishes, young lady, have consequences." Zawadi approached, feeling a mix of fear and hope. "I don't understand," she said, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "I just wanted something that would make me accepted, something that would make me worthy in the eyes of others." Jabali watched her for a moment, with an expression of understanding, but also of severity. "Wishes made from a pure heart bring blessings," he explained. "But those born from the desire to please others or fill gaps you don't understand carry a high price. And you, Zawadi, asked for something you thought others wanted to see, not what you really wanted for yourself." Jabali's words cut through Zawadi like a blade. She felt a lump form in her throat as she protested. "I just wanted to be loved. I just wish people would stop laughing at me." His voice was a mix of anger and pain, echoing through the forest like a cry for help. Jabali didn't look away. He waited for her to finish before speaking again, with a calm that seemed unnerving. "Love, young lady, does not come from how others see you. It comes from how you see yourself. You tried to mold yourself to please others, but you forgot that the only acceptance that matters is your own." Zawadi felt a weight fall on his shoulders. Her hands shook as she gripped the golden hair that now seemed more like a curse than a blessing. "So what do I do?" she asked, her voice breaking. Jabali sighed deeply, as if he carried centuries of wisdom in his words. "To reverse what was done, you will need to face the truth. Not the truth that others tell you, but the one that lives inside you. The reflection you avoid, the fears you hide. Only when you accept who you really are, without the need to change to please others, will you find the freedom you seek." There was a heavy silence between them. Zawadi knew that Jabali's words were true, but accepting that truth was a challenge that seemed insurmountable. She looked at the stone on the ground and, for a moment, felt angry at it, as if that object was responsible for her pain. But deep down, he knew it was his choice. "What if I don't make it?" he asked almost in a whisper. Jabali smiled faintly, a smile that was both comforting and mysterious. "The strength to face our fears lies within all of us. You are stronger than you believe, Zawadi. But only you can find out the answer to that question. Before he could say anything else, Jabali began to walk away, disappearing into the trees as if he had never been there. Zawadi stood still, alone again, but now with an understanding she didn't have before. The path to freedom would be difficult, but she knew she couldn't go back. As she looked at the hair that flowed around her, she realized that it was not just a symbol of her physical transformation, but also of something deeper, a reflection of everything she still had to face. Zawadi followed Jabali deep into the Duma forest, where the air seemed thicker and the sounds of nature grew more and more distant. Each step felt heavier, as if something unseen was testing his resolve. The silence between them was almost palpable, but Jabali didn't seem bothered. He walked steadily, leaning on his staff, until they stopped before a narrow entrance on the side of a hill covered in intertwining roots. "It's here," said Jabali, his voice deep and full of meaning. Zawadi looked at the dark opening with apprehension, feeling a chill run down his spine. But she knew there was no going back. The cave was damp and cold, with the sound of falling drops echoing off the stone walls. The narrow path opened into a large hall, lit by a soft light that seemed to come from nowhere. In the center rested an antique mirror, with a frame made of wood carved with symbols that Zawadi did not recognize. The mirror seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, as if it were alive, waiting for her. Jabali gestured toward the mirror. "This is the moment, Zawadi. Here you will find the truth about yourself." Zawadi hesitated. The reflection she imagined seeing was the one that always haunted her, the bald, rejected and humiliated girl. But something in Jabali's expression encouraged her to come closer. When he finally looked in the mirror, he saw the image he feared most. Her golden hair was still there, but its presence seemed to not match the reflected figure. She saw herself, but at the same time she felt that the mirror was showing something deeper. The tears began to flow before she said any words. "Why do I need to do this?" he asked, almost in a whisper. Jabali responded patiently, "Because this is where the real confrontation takes place. Not with others, but with yourself." Zawadi remained silent, staring at his reflection. He saw flashes of his childhood, the children's laughter, Mwalima's insults, the pitying looks from some people in the village. He felt the pain return, as if each memory was a wound being reopened. "I'm not enough," he murmured, his voice breaking. Jabali shook his head, without looking away from her. "You believe this because you have allowed outside voices to define who you are. But the mirror is not here to judge you. He's here to show you what you need to see." His words echoed in her mind. Zawadi closed her eyes, taking deep breaths, trying to push away the fear and doubt that consumed her. When he opened his eyes again, he saw something different in the mirror. Behind her golden hair, she saw the girl she was before all this, with eyes full of curiosity and a shy smile. She realized that that girl was still there, hidden beneath layers of pain and insecurity. "Who am I?" she asked herself, out loud, as if searching for the answer in her reflection. Then the words began to emerge, almost as if they were coming from somewhere deep within her. "I am Zawadi, daughter of the earth, strong as the roots of trees. I am not defined by what I see in the mirror, but by the light I carry in my heart." With each word, he felt a strength growing within him, a sense of liberation he had never experienced. The mirror began to shine brightly, and the golden hair, which had previously seemed so important, began to fall apart. They dissolved like dust in the wind, slowly disappearing, until his head was back to how it was before, smooth and hairless. Zawadi touched his head, expecting to feel the same shame as before. But instead, he felt a deep peace. For the first time, he didn't care what others thought. "I didn't feel the weight of other people's opinions or the desire to change to please." She felt clearly and powerfully that she was complete exactly as she was. Jabali, who had watched everything silently, gave a faint smile of approval. "Now you understand," he said, his voice full of wisdom. "True strength has never been in what you try to show others. It's always been about accepting who you really are." Zawadi looked into the mirror one last time. It now reflected something different, something she had never seen before, an image of herself, radiant, not because of her appearance, but because of the light that seemed to emanate from within her. It was a vision of who she really was, and that was enough. As the mirror's glow began to fade, Zawadi knew he had taken the first step toward freeing himself completely. But deep down, she knew there was still more to face, more truths to discover. When Zawadi returned to the village of Jambazi, each step seemed to carry the weight of the past and the lightness of his transformation. The sun illuminated the village as always, but the looks that previously followed her with derision or fear were now different. There was no longer any golden hair to attract attention, but Zawadi's posture had changed. She walked with her head high, her shoulders straight, and a sparkle in her eyes that no one had seen before. It was as if the land itself recognized its newfound strength, and people felt that something greater was happening. As I advanced through the dirt streets, the whispers began. Some watched her with curiosity, others with caution, but there were also those who felt ashamed for everything they had said and done. The children, who had previously mocked her, now followed her silently, keeping a respectful distance. However, Zawadi did not look away from his goal. The central square, where the village used to gather for parties and celebrations. That was where she needed to speak. This was where his new journey would begin. Arriving at the center of the square, Zawadi stopped and looked around. People began to approach, forming a shy semicircle. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rustling of the wind in the nearby trees. She took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs, and then began to speak. "I know many of you wonder why I came back," she said, her voice clear but full of emotion. "I came back because I discovered something I need to share. For a long time, I looked for something external to feel worthy. I believed that if I changed my appearance, if I became something different, the laughter and insults would stop. I thought that if I pleased others, I would finally be loved and accepted." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of pain and learning. The village remained silent as Zawadi continued. "But I realized that none of this matters if I don't accept myself. True beauty is not in the eyes of others. It's in how we see ourselves, in who we are inside." There were tears in her eyes, but they weren't from sadness. They were of liberation. "I spent so much time trying to change to fit the mold that people expected of me, that I forgot to appreciate who I really am. And now, I see that the strength I sought was always here, within me." Mwalamo, who was among the crowd, stepped forward. For the first time, her rigid posture seemed to give way, and her eyes were watery. "Zawadi," she began, her voice hesitant and almost a whisper, "I was wrong. For years, I was blind to the strength that was always in you. I only saw what was missing and never recognized what was most important to you." She paused for a moment, as if fighting her emotions. "Please forgive me." The entire village held its breath. They had never seen Mwalamo, a woman known for her toughness, ask anyone for forgiveness. Zawadi stepped forward and with a soft smile, nodded. No more words were needed. Forgiveness was given, and the weight they both carried seemed to dissipate. Over the next few days, something extraordinary began to happen. People came to see Zawadi not as the bald girl who was once laughed at, nor as the mysterious figure with golden hair. They began to see her as someone who had overcome adversity and turned her pain into strength. Zawadi proceeded to gather the children under the shade of the large baobab tree to tell their story. "Do you know what makes someone special?" she asked. "It's not how the person seems. It's how she feels about herself. True beauty is here," he said, pointing to the heart. The children listened attentively, fascinated, and little by little they began to see their own differences with different eyes. The adults also started looking for Zawadi. Nyahira, who had previously spread rumors of curses, approached her with her son Omari and said, humbly, "I let myself be carried away by fear and judged you without understanding. Thank you for showing there is another way." Omari, who had previously been embarrassed to speak, began to smile again, inspired by the new energy that Zawadi brought to the village. Other residents came to her, asking for advice, or just trying to listen to her words. Zawadi realized that her journey had become bigger than herself. Now it was about helping others find their own strengths. As time passed, Zawadi's story became a living lesson in Jambazi. The black stone was never seen again, and many believed it was gone forever. Some speculated that the Duma forest held other mysteries, but no one had the courage to explore. For Zawadi, this mattered little. She knew that the stone had fulfilled its purpose, and true transformation had taken place in her heart. Zawadi continued to inspire those around her, transforming their pain into a force capable of uniting and healing. It was no longer her golden hair or her desire to please that defined her story, but rather the strength to accept who she really was. And so, the village of Jambazi, once trapped in superficial judgments, learned that true power comes not from what we show the world, but from what we accept in ourselves. Zawadi's lesson remained alive from generation to generation as a reminder that true beauty and strength come from within. If you enjoyed this video, please help us grow by subscribing to this humble channel. And if you'd like to watch more videos like this, we prepared the next video especially for you. Click here to watch.